The journey towards self-acceptance is often long and very difficult. So today I want to share some ways that you can work towards accepting and affirming yourself as a trans person. I've said this before, but going to therapy is such an important part of this process of being able to affirm yourself. Probably gets old how often I talk about therapy, but having someone who can give you that unconditional positive regard is so important. Someone who can give you that outside perspective that you may desperately need, because it's difficult to do that on our own. Because if we are constantly getting bombarded with those messages that there's something wrong with us, it's hard to validate that same piece of us. Likely repress these things for years. And going to therapy allows you to not only unpack this, but do so in a safe and affirming and accepting space. Well, if you have a good therapist. They can help you see that there is a beautiful person inside of you that is just waiting to come out, or waiting to fully come out, or waiting to be embraced. If you have already come out, but you're still struggling to embrace yourself. And that brings me to point number 2. You have to remind yourself that being trans is a beautiful thing. Validate yourself, appreciate yourself, love yourself. And it's hard to do in those early transition days and months, maybe even the first couple of years. It's gonna feel uncomfortable. Find the things you do like about yourself. And the dysphoria is obviously very real. I experience that still. I've experienced it countless times, and I know many of you have. So I don't want to undermine that. We like ourselves enough to give ourselves the opportunity to transition. And maybe that's all we have, but that is a great starting point. You care enough about yourself and your life to at least give yourself the chance to move towards being authentic. Don't forget that. When we as trans people really take the time to explore our gender, unpack the emotions, unpack our identity, figure out who we are, what's fulfilling, what we want to do with our lives, we often get a much deeper appreciation of who we are and where we want to go in the world, what we want to get out of the world. Such a beautiful thing about doing this work, this self-exploration work. Of course, sometimes we're going to gravitate towards the negative. That is inevitable, especially as a trans person, where we are subjected to our fair share of discrimination. So it is impossible, or nearly impossible, to always be positive. But remind yourself, many positive things do exist. You're moving towards this journey. You care about yourself enough to start this journey or continue this journey. Now that you're you, the world is truly your oyster. And of course, I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, but I bet you were like me before you came out. Technically, things might have been easier before coming out, but you're probably also terribly unhappy. I know I was. My severe unhappiness, my severe depression, my suicidality, those are things that prompted me to be like, I don't want to continue going down this path. I care about myself enough to make a change. So ask yourself, what do you want? A chance to live a life that's fulfilling, filled with wonder and possibility, a life where you can be yourself, even if it is a much harder path. I talk about therapy, getting that outside source, getting that support is important, but we don't want to rely just on our therapist, which is why another thing we need to keep in mind is finding community. That is such an important way to affirm ourselves. Reminding ourselves that we are not alone in how we identify and the experiences we have, the journeys we're on. Our journeys are uniquely ours, but there are so many similarities between our journeys. And it's important to find other people out there that have these similar journeys. But even more importantly, understand what we're going through and will simply love us for who we are. Obviously, there are assholes in our trans community like any other community, but they're few and far between in my experiences. We often do stick together and seek community because we understand how tough it is to just be ourselves in this world. It shouldn't be so tough to just be yourself. But for people like us, it is. It currently is. Hopefully it'll change one day, but that is not our current reality. So it's important to remind yourself that you are valuable and that other people will see that. So when you're feeling down, having lots of dysphoria, feeling like the world is falling down, which is always acceptable to feel that way, but especially so these days, I fully validate those experiences. But remember, there are other people out there like you who do support you, who do love you, or if you haven't found them yet, they are out there. It's hard to reach out when I struggle, but I know from my own experience that one of the most helpful things for me during my struggles is just finding somebody in my chosen family that I can spend time with, regardless of what I need in that moment. We have to remember that it's not all bad. Talking about the positives, there are a lot of negatives, there are a lot of discriminatory experiences, there are a lot of struggles, there is dysphoria, there's a lot of hard things we'll deal with, but we have to remind ourselves that it does get better. Know that struggles will eventually pass, things do eventually get better. Transition is hard as hell. Not gonna argue with you on that. If I could have changed things just by waving a magic wand, fucking of course I would have done that. We all would have done that. We've probably all had those dreams, those thoughts, those feelings of just like, I wish I could just snap my finger and the next day, I'm a girl. But the reality, we don't have the technology for that yet. Maybe one day. More importantly, because we don't have magic wands yet or probably ever, patience is so important. During transition, we need to be patient because in many ways we are uprooting many parts of our lives. We're uprooting how we interface with ourselves and the world around us. And that sounded super nerdy to say interface. But we're allowing ourselves, our true selves, to come out in this process. And this changes how the world sees us, how they label us, how they treat us, how they make space for us, for better and for worse, depending on the space. It's hard, as I've said, but it's important to remember to take things one day at a time, one step at a time. Think up and write down your goals for your transition. I fully recommend that. And in this process, try your best to have realistic expectations in terms of, outcomes of various transition steps or how long it will take to go through certain steps. But don't try to do it all at once. Just like anything in life, if you try to do too much at one time, you will exhaust yourself, you will get burnt out, you will start to resent things, you'll start seeing more of the negative things and less of the positive things in life, and we just don't want that. It's easy to want to rush things, and it probably sounds easier said than done coming from me, who started transitioning almost 6 years ago. But believe me, it does take time, but you will get there. And when you do accomplish these steps, take the time to really sit and feel that relief or that feeling of accomplishment or that feeling of joy that comes with each step you accomplish. And it gets easier to do each successive step once you sit and realize that oh, I can do this. And obviously not everyone is gonna support you. Not every step is gonna be joyous, unfortunately. But again, remember that you have a community of people. Find your chosen family who will be there for you when some of these steps maybe don't go quite as intended. I started my list with therapy, then support groups, then coming out to friends, then, coming out to family, gradually coming out to coworkers, gradually building up a wardrobe, gradually refining my makeup skills, figuring out some of the medical transition steps. But it's a process. It is a journey. And like most journeys, it's difficult at first, but it gets easier with each step we take. Remind ourselves that it is such an act of self-love to start taking that journey towards being ourselves. So all that being said, let me know what you think. Are there other ways that you affirm yourself, that you stay strong, especially in those tough times? What is it that you do to remind yourself that it truly is beautiful to be trans? And as always, thank you so much for watching. Tipsy and I love you all so very much and hope that you're staying safe and healthy and as strong as possible during this tough time. If you have not done so already, please give this a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Bye for now.